Jennifer Hall has been the Executive Director of the Ann Arbor Housing Commission since 2011. She has secured over $100 million to redevelop the Commission's public housing. And to develop additional affordable housing in partnership with the City of Ann Arbor to meet its affordable housing goals. I went to the Ann Arbor Community Academy and learned a lot from Jennifer Hall a few years ago, so recommend that as well if you haven't done that. So please join me in welcoming Jennifer Hall.
I love that you guys exist. Is my mic working? Can you guys hear? I actually started this work in the late 1980s. That's how I met my husband. We were involved in the Housing Action Committee. That's how I met Brian. Where'd Brian go? What was our motto? Does anybody remember? Anybody that's as old as I am? Do you remember, Brian? House people, not cars. So we're coming full circle, as you'll see, because now we're developing a bunch of parking lots, thanks to the mayor and city council, which are ones that we were protesting against turning into parking decks back in the 1980s. My husband is actually a member of your group. If I was not a city employee, I would 100% be a part of your group because you're doing awesome work, so I appreciate it. Love that you guys exist. I'm going to whip through a couple background slides just so we're kind of on the same page, and then I'm going to talk about the thing that I'm an expert at, which is developing affordable housing, and so I'm going to focus most of my time on that. So we both own housing, and we are the largest voucher program in the county. We cover Washtenaw County and Monroe County. Where are the properties that we own and manage? Not in the second ward. Not much in the first ward, mostly in the fifth and down here in the third ward. So we want to be in a lot more areas. This just tells you we have all kinds of vouchers. One thing you'll notice, we're the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. Only about a third of our vouchers are used in the city, most of which are on housing we own or like Avalon Housing. So not a lot of what's called tenant-based vouchers, where it's your choice where you want to live. People can't afford to take their voucher and live in Ann Arbor because the rents here exceed the size that HUD allows in the voucher program. So you'll see we have a lot of our vouchers are used in the Ypsi area. You should all know this, 30% of your income, Transportation, when you can't live in the city, then if your transportation and housing exceeds 45% of your income, you're considered cost burden. Think of this in your head. If I had a lot more time, I'd go around the room. Think of a number in your head and you're like, oh, this income of a household or a family, this is when it starts to become difficult to live in Ann Arbor. Because I'm going to show you what our median income is. It's $125,900. And what HUD does is they do some kind of annual marketing survey, something, and then they come up with this number. They stick it in a 4-person household at 100% median income, and every other number in here in this chart is a formula. So the real number is the median income is $125,900. That's all of Washtenaw County. The Ann Arbor primary statistical area is actually Washtenaw County. So if you take this chart and you say, okay, how much would you be spending on your housing costs if you spent no more than 30% of your income on housing? $3,147. So if you're thinking that's really, really, really high and you're surprised, we have a very high income, high cost area, as you know. The reason I have 60% highlighted is because that has been the target that the city of Ann Arbor has had for a lot of our programs, whether it's through zoning, brownfield, and a lot of HUD programs too. So most of the things that we do, 60%, 50%, 30% AMI, sometimes 80% of AMI as well. When people try to understand like how much housing out there is set aside by deed restriction, not naturally occurring, by deed restriction for low-income households, that's this yellow line right here. So this is the entire county, all the housing types. So you have housing with mortgages, without, and when you get down to the blue at the bottom, that's the number of vacant units at any given time. About 6%. Whether it's, somebody's moving, they're selling their house, somebody's renting, they leave, there's a vacancy. About 3% of the housing in the county is actually restricted for low-income households. 3%, that's it, 3%. Used to be more, but if people have heard of low-income housing tax credits, I can do a deep dive, but that'll take us all day. Those households that used to be income restricted have converted to market rate that became low income in the 1980s and 90s. I cannot emphasize enough, when you are talking to people in the community, what is the biggest impact on our marketplace? The university. I'm a U of M alum. I'm not anti-student. I'm not anti-U of M. They keep adding human beings who need support from other human beings. They're the biggest employer in the marketplace, biggest driver of our economy. But the amount of housing until very, very recently has pretty much stayed the same. And there's a pros and cons to the university providing housing. They will say, as they do all the time, it's beneficial if we don't provide housing because it is part of your tax base, which is 100% true. And so when they took over Fingerly Lumber and built all those dorms, I was like, yay, thank you, thank goodness. And Councilmember Dish reminded me, Jennifer, they took them off the tax roll. I'm like, yes, I know, but we have more housing, thousands of units. So it is a balance between what the university can and should be providing, because they're trying to do more, but they're also taking away our tax base. So this is not Washtenaw County, this is the city of Ann Arbor. The largest number of people who are in poverty are students. Why? Does that make sense to anyone? I mean, I was poor when I was a student. I don't know how the rest of you. But when the Census Bureau comes by and asks you, how much do you make? I don't know, $3,000 a year, $5,000 a year. I'm a student. So we don't have a lot of poor people in our community. Well, where do poor people live? This is a map not of poverty, but of where people live who are on some kind of public assistance. It's in Ypsilanti. I mean, you probably all knew that intuitively, but that is where the highest amount of poverty is for people who are on public assistance, not just poor based on your student income. And that has a big impact on our community. It has a big impact on Ypsilanti, Superior Township, Ypsi Township as well. So now I'm going to dive a little deeper, much deeper into how do you develop affordable housing. It does not matter what kind of, I should even say how is any housing developed. It doesn't matter. You have to have land. And we say develop. I'm going to talk about, assume this is new construction, and I'll talk about acquisition. You have to secure the land. When we're doing affordable housing, we cannot compete with the private sector. Like, I don't have, people may think because we have the millage that I have $10 million in the bank that I could just put a sales clause together, but I do not. So I can't compete fast enough with the private sector to acquire properties. We end up putting lots of different funding sources together, and they all have very lengthy grant application processes. And so that is a challenge for affordable housing in our community. Everybody has multiple funding sources when they do affordable housing development. Like I said, you have lots of regs, lots of scoring. It takes a lot of time. So how can the community help? There's many, many ways that the public can support affordable housing. Land. That is one of the things the city of Ann Arbor has done. They are providing land for us to develop as affordable housing. We acquired, if you've been down there on the corner of Catherine and right around the corner, 4th Dunbar Tower, we were moving people in. I'll talk about that later. We got that from the city for $1. Like, tremendous public contribution. I probably can't think of anything more important than land when you're trying to do affordable housing, especially in a really expensive area like this. And then money, millage, all kinds of things. Zoning, increased density, like is going on with the comprehensive plan. Reduce taxes. The city of Ann Arbor has a $1 per unit per year for qualified affordable housing projects. $1 per year. I haven't seen any other community in the United States that has done that. So that's a tremendous, also, public contribution. So what kinds of development options do you have? new construction, acquisition. Anything else? Only two. But there's pros and cons, and it can change over time. Like this has changed since I've been around, which has been a long time. Went back in the late 80s, if we were doing today what we did then, inclusive of what you all are doing, we would probably not be in this housing crisis that we are in right now, honestly, with the amount of resources and amount of work that everybody's doing. And housing was a lot less expensive to build. And post-COVID, our costs have gone up 40 to 50%. With the tariffs that are happening right now, we don't know what's going on. It's just crazy out there. So some of the pros for new construction is we're actually adding new housing to the marketplace. We're not just converting something, we're adding. You can build it sustainably. Like a lot of our older housing also has environmental issues. Like we at Dunbar, we built with geothermal. It's very hard to do retroactively, but you can do it if you know in advance. On the con side, it is more expensive today than it ever has been to do new construction compared to in the past. It used to be, pretty break even, honestly, because there were so many other problems with acquiring properties. A lot of times there's no accessibility. Everything has a staircase. You have garden apartments and then apartments you have to go up or down. So nobody with a wheelchair or with physical disabilities could live there. And it really depends on the property condition, but the other con is it's not very fast. It can take 5 to 7 years from the time you think about a project to the time people are moving into your project. Acquisition can take a year or so, sometimes when there's people living there, depending on their income, that can add expense because you have to relocate them, depending on your funding source. So that's kind of the difference between, I'm gonna stop right there to see if anybody has a question just about new construction versus acquisition. Yeah, go ahead, Donnell.
Can you give us a sense of what a per unit cost for new construction looks like?
It all depends. It all depends, but I'm gonna say easily $500,000. If you're talking about a multi-family structure, we're not talking about a little tiny home. We're not talking about, 3D printed home, which you could do for cheaper when you include the land and all the different expenses. We're looking at a property right now that we're trying to acquire, and it's roughly $275,000 per unit, but there's other costs besides the acquisition price. So when you see something for sale, it's not divided by the number of units. I have a lot of other costs I have to do, including any renovations, any environmental. There's like tons of fees, attorney fees, financing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you got to add all that on top. You look like Jen, like you were going to say something. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Is it possible to do new construction with entirely 100% public subsidies?
It's possible, but I would not recommend it because you will not build very much. So we will never build something that's 100% affordable housing millage, and that's all we do. That would make my life so easy. Like, it would be so much less complicated, but I want to build a lot of affordable housing. Like, I want to build as much as we can. And so we want to leverage every dollar we can from other funding sources, whether it's federal, whether it's state, whether it's other local. I'll show you our Dunbar a little bit later, and you can see how we've layered that funding. Like, you would have a fraction of the amount of housing if that was the only thing you did was local funding. Yeah.
Who actually does the building of the building, and do they profit?
It's just like a market rate, you hire a general contractor and they hire all of their subs. And so depends on what you think profit is, that's built right into your pro forma. They put overhead, profit, and general conditions. So it covers all their staff, it covers all their risk, insurance, materials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, how are you? People tend to get woozy when they see that number, $500,000 for those people. I assume a lot of those costs are completely out of your control.
100% are out of my control.
That's my question. Is there anything the city could change zoning or regulation-wise that would affect that?
In the city of Ann Arbor, we have a lot of city council members and the mayor here. It is more expensive to build than in other communities. I see this, I hear this all the time, like with the people we work with, they're like, oh my gosh, Jennifer, what is this footing drain disconnect program? I've never heard of such a thing. Why do we have to pay for old infrastructure, things like that. So we have, over time, we have a lot of additional regs that do add cost. I'm not going to say it's like $100,000 a unit, but it's not insignificant when you're like counting every dollar. So we always have conversations with city staff about these issues, like what could we change? What I tell people is the employees of the city of Ann Arbor are the best at what they do. Every department does the best practices, but when engineering's best practices and transportation is best, and solid waste is best practices and DDA is best practices, you have these many regs and it's hard to like braid them together. It's very challenging. Yeah.
The Economic Development Office of the EDC is bringing in a contractor and everything, so I know that they're going to do process of evaluation, interview stakeholders, interview applicants and everything, and determine where the process would be included. So
yeah.
It's going to be a re-engineered.
And people will have to give up things that they hold very dear, so it's going to be very hard. I mean, what do you say? I laugh because I argue with Brett Leonard all the time, like, Brett, why are you making me put Class A bicycle containers? None of my residents need a Class A, enclosed locked bicycle container. So like, but other people, that's very important to them. So like, that's going to be a discussion on city council, I imagine, things like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you deal with single family homes at all, or you're always only working with multifamily apartments?
We have one single family home that we own. I'll show you later, we're going to be developing some single family homes later too. It's on my slide, yeah. All right, I'm gonna keep moving. Who does development? Public. I also have private nonprofits. Our development arm is a nonprofit. And then there's private for-profit. Private for-profit developers are the single largest developers of affordable housing. Period, the end. More than anybody else that does this kind of work. And almost every project I've ever worked on, we have had all three. All three, pretty much, every project. All right, I'm gonna try to explain development. I'm gonna walk you through the difference between developing a market rate versus an affordable housing project. Land. I gotta hire an architect. I gotta hire a general contractor. I gotta hire an engineer. I gotta hire a surveyor. No one comes up to me and says, Jennifer, I love what you're doing. I'm gonna give you a 20% discount. No one's ever done that before. So I have to pay the same amount as the private sector market rate does. So you'll see the costs are roughly the same. We do have things that we have to pay for that the private sector doesn't, but it's marginally higher. The biggest difference is how do you finance the development? So anybody who owns a home, you probably put a down payment down and got a mortgage. It's kind of similar with the private sector. It's more complicated than that, but they have a loan and then they try to get equity, like $1 million from you, $1 million from you, $1 million from you, $1 million from you, and they bring in equity. And then they have to pay back the loan on a fixed schedule, just like your mortgage. But the equity is only if the project's making money. Then you get money back, you get money back, you get money back. So I'm just going to say it's roughly 20% equity, 80% loan. Low-income housing tax credits is the single biggest program in the United States to develop affordable housing. It is not a HUD program. It is a IRS program. It is intended to try to get private investors to put money into affordable housing rather than HUD. HUD does not support and provide money for affordable housing anymore. They just really don't. So they have this program, it's all across the US. MISHDA is the administrator in Michigan. It's competitive, so we apply, it takes a really long time. And you end up with an allocation by MISHDA. So let's say I get a $10 million allocation. I don't pay taxes, I don't pay business taxes, and so I have to find an investor. Will you invest in my project for $10 million?
I don't know.
Yeah, a really good developer, it's affordable. How much would you give me for $10 million that you can write off on your taxes?
You need to ask somebody who's a better accountant.
Laura, Miss Lorenz, what would you give me?
I want 20% return.
All right, so you're gonna give me what, like 9 million or maybe 8.5 million, something like that?
Okay.
And maybe you're gonna give me 8 million. And I was like, wait.
18%.
But that's exactly what happens. We go out and we have to find someone to buy our $10 million in credits, and they give me cash. I take the cash, combine it with all my other funding sources, take a loan or whatever, and then that's how we build our housing. And the investor writes that off on their business tax forms. They get all kinds of other ways they make money too. So I put 60% AMI as the average, so we end up with about more like 80% or more in equity, and then the rest I can take out in a loan. If I want to serve really low income people, not just 60% AMI, I need grant money. I need the affordable housing millage. I need brownfield grants. I need grants from the DDA, something like that. And so then I can lower my rents by having some grant money so I can serve lower income households. What does that look like on the operating side? For those of you who live in a rental housing or have in the past, the majority of your rent goes to debt. So people ask, why is this housing so expensive, especially new? Because that's fresh debt. You have to pay that off. And so you can see this is like a market rate. You pay a lot in debt, you have your operating costs, you pay taxes, and then you come down here to these low-income housing tax credit projects in Ann Arbor, we don't pay taxes. It's almost nothing. And so your rents have to be much higher in the market rate than on the affordable housing side. And you can see our operating costs are a bit more than on the market rate side because we have a lot of regulations we have to comply with. But that's the simplified version of development.
So is the Housing Commission a syndicator then?
No, that's so smart. She knew what a syndicate. It's called a syndicator, are the folks that go out and get investors. No, we have to hire we find a syndicator and they get investors. Yeah, exactly. Any questions about that? It's way more complicated, but that's like a basic understanding of how it works. Yeah, go ahead, Dana.
So if you go back to your capital stack, yes, that one. You mentioned that the LIHTC was competitive and MSHA administers that. When you say it's competitive, is that statewide? So when you go to do a development here in Ann Arbor, you're competing with people in Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, and Traverse City?
That's correct.
Or does it mean it's only in Washington?
It's statewide, but they recently implemented a new rule where I forget exactly what it says. I think they won't do more than 2 projects in the same county every 2 years, which is four funding cycles. That's new. Because we actually have had a lot recently of tax credit applications, and there's what's called a 9% and a 4% tax credit, and it used to be the 9% was competitive, the 4% wasn't. Now they're both very competitive. They're just a little different from each other. Yeah. Did somebody else have a question? Tisha, sit in my seat. There's the green right there. Okay. Where are we developing? I talked about land and the need to have land available. So in 2019, the old YMCA lot, 350 South 5th, next to the Blake Transit Center, had been passing back and forth between private ownership, public ownership for, at that point, 17-ish years. And the city reacquired it. And so there was a discussion on city council, I think the mayor was on city council then, about what to do to develop that site. And so I asked, hey, can we do an analysis to see what makes sense to develop? Because it's very complex, and so you really need to dive deep on financing and restrictions and things like that. And that led to a broad discussion and a lot of properties coming into play where other city council members say, hey, what about Stadium? What are we doing with that? What about Baldwin? What are we doing about 121 Catherine? So city council ended up saying, hey, let's look at all of our underutilized properties and see which ones make sense to develop as affordable housing. So we ended up doing that. Some of them we ended up not being able to do, like the one on Baldwin, they had a restriction on a grant that they had previously. So the other thing that happened right after that was the affordable housing millage was adopted by the community. Thank you for anybody who approved that. And what city council did is, this was during COVID when the petitioners were trying to get all the petitions. And so then they couldn't go door to door. And city council actually ended up voting to, I don't remember who all on council voted to put it on the ballot. Just the mayor?
And so voted for it too.
Yes. And so they adopted some guidelines so people knew what they were voting for. I won't read them, but you can see some of the ideas that they had. And so we've adopted a strategy where we look at what is the Housing Commission doing in the pipeline, and we want to have some funds available if something unexpectedly does come on the market that's for sale that we could quickly grab, which is really hard, like I said. And then we also provide funding to other developers. So I'm going to go into what we've accomplished so far and what's in the pipeline. So completed. So our goal was to do at least 1,500. It's 1,500 units. It's a 20-year millage. We have built 199, which doesn't seem like a lot. It's not. But we have over 1,000 that are in the pipeline, and we're in year 6. So if we get all these developed, we will absolutely get more than 1,500 apartments based on how much we are leveraging from outside sources. I'm going to go through each of these real quick. So Hickory Way, which is on South Maple, they're in phase 3 of their project. So we provided $2 million in capital dollars, and then they're getting $800,000 a year for services. Because the other thing about the millage is up to 20% can be used for services for people who are living in those properties. And Avalon serves not exclusively, but mostly people who are homeless, chronically homeless. So they need to have a lot of on-site services. This is also an Avalon project, the Grove at Meridian. They just opened it up this summer, 50 apartments. Again, both on the capital side and service dollars, and the land was donated by Washtenaw County. This is a private developer called the Annex Group. If anybody drives down Stadium, behind the Stadium post office, you can see a building going up. That is a low-income housing tax credit, 250 apartments, all affordable. And so we've also provided them with some funding, and what we're doing with for-profit private developers is we are loaning them the money below interest, so we'll get it paid back so we can use it for future housing projects. Someone like Avalon or the Housing Commission, it is granted to them, granted to us, granted to them. This is in the, I don't know if they've gotten approval at site at the Planning Commission yet, but they've been in the site plan approval process. Across from, if you're on State Street heading south and you, instead of turning into, I forget the name of that road that goes over to Costco, on the other side of the road, there's next to the U-Haul, there's a empty lot. So they're trying to build a low-income housing tax credit project as well there. And so we provided $1.5 million loan as a for-profit development and some project-based vouchers. Dunbar Tower, 63 apartments, half for people who are homeless with project-based vouchers, half for people who are low-income artists. And this was a real milestone in that City Council, many of whom are here who were on City Council at the time, voted to sell a bond, which is a very big deal. Hasn't been, I don't know anybody else in Michigan who's done that, and it's very rare in the United States. So, Cynthia, council member, so sell a bond that is paid back with future millage dollars. Because otherwise, I have maybe $5 million a year. I got to hold it. I gotta wait another year, now I have 10. I gotta wait another year, now I have 15. This way we can sell the bond and pay it back with future millage dollars, so I can have lots of projects happening all at the same time. This project really meets and exceeds the city's sustainability goals in that we actually did 600-foot geothermal wells. It was a very big deal. You will never be able to see it from the ground, but we also have solar and green roof, lots of bike parking, and we're going to do our open house in the fall. I'll make sure I let all of you, whoever the contact person is, know, and then you can get a tour of the building in the fall, because we are building out the first floor for, I almost said the name, it's not out there yet, for our community space that is dedicated to the West Side. Tisha Montague is here, who's on our Community Leadership Council. And so that's a place of celebration of the historic Black neighborhood, and we're super excited when that gets built out. That'll be part of our open house. All right, here's our capital stack for Catherine. Anybody see HUD in there? I don't think so. Yes, they do. HUD home funds through Washtenaw County, $2 million, which the president just said they were going to eliminate home funds. We'll see if that actually happens in the next budget cycle. But it takes a lot of different funding sources, and this is where the leveraging goes to. The city's millage was 9 plus 1.9, so a little under 11. And the rest of it we were able to leverage from other funding sources. Here's a representation of what that first floor historic and cultural space will look like on the bottom floor of Dunbar. We also acquired Siller Terrace. It's right off of Liberty. At that time, most of the money came from ARPA funds, but there's a little bit of city millage funds. So this is an example of an acquisition project. I forget exactly, but I want to say it was a little under $300,000 per unit to acquire that back then. 350 South 5th. You will see us breaking ground this summer. We are hoping to close in June. Thank you. I feel that way too, because it has been a lot. It's a 20-story building, and there'll be 330 apartments. All of them will be affordable. Under the LIHTC program, you can do 60% AMI average. Highest income is 80% AMI, but the average has to be 60% AMI or less. So we have a mixture of incomes. We are partnering with the Blake and with the DDA. We're actually going to allow the Blake to expand their platform onto our site so that you can get on the bus on either side of the platform. Arbor South is a private development. This is the first one we have done something like this, where a private developer is doing a really large development, asking for brownfield TIF, triggering the need to include affordable housing. And so we are partnering with them to do, rather than mix in affordable housing throughout where the developer would own and manage the apartments, they are agreeing to let us build a standalone affordable apartment, which we could talk pros and cons of that back and forth. For me, the pro is we'll be the manager. We'll be screening people in instead of screening people out. We'll be pulling together all of the funding. We'll be designing the building, and we'll have a permanent deed restriction, which I didn't mention that. All of these projects have a permanent deed restriction. Even the private for-profit, for the portion that we are funding, they have to have a deed restriction on.
Jennifer, sorry, can I ask a question right here? Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm Darnell White, and I volunteer on the Planning Commission. I happen to be its chair this year. So if you're wondering why I'm asking all these very specific questions, is because I see all these proposals come to the table. So one of the things that we heard through the comprehensive land use process is we should be requiring private developers to build affordable housing. But I've heard you say in different settings that you would prefer to have money in lieu of those units in private hands. But this seems to be a slight mix of that. So could you just talk about that for just a moment?
When I first started out doing this work, I was all about private developers building affordable housing. That was a great idea until it is implemented. And the reason it's been a struggle in our community is because most of those projects are actually student housing by design. I mean, that's their target market. And so when the apartments are set aside, they tend to also have students, but not students that we know are from low-income households necessarily. It's just like any other student. And so that didn't seem like our intended market. Like if we could guarantee that those students were really from low-income households, I'd be much more supportive of that. And we've actually had some cases where we had some ownership units where somebody bought a unit for their child who was a dental clinic, and when they graduated, they started renting out those owner units. So it's I think, sounds great. As I said, I was 100% supportive of that when I first started out, and the more we did, the fewer benefits I saw from it. And so I've been suggesting that we instead do cash in lieu of units in these for-profit developments so that we can leverage them on actual affordable housing projects, like you saw before. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you explain what it means to be permanently deed restricted, permanently affordable? Can you explain what that means?
There's literally a deed restriction that says there's either X number, X percent of units that have to be affordable for this AMI percent.
Forever?
Forever.
But the building would last for more than, say,
Yeah.
60 years.
I'd
What
be
happens
dead, I
after
don't
that?
know. Somebody's an attorney here, I don't know. Yeah, because buildings aren't gonna last for 1,000 years, but we'll see how long they last. But yeah, you'd have to, if it got demolished, if there was a fire, you'd have to rebuild it with that deed restriction.
But the city holds the deed restriction. So who holds the deed restriction?
So for our properties, the deed is with our nonprofit, Ann Arbor Housing Development Corporation. And then we file that with, and we also have restrictive covenants. But when the city, I guess that's not totally 100% true, when the city deeded it over to us, that was included in the deed restriction, then the city deeded it to us. So it's in that document. Oops. And to Donnell's question, this is different. And to me, the reason it's different is because it's not 15% affordable in this building, that building. We are going to own and manage it as an affordable housing project. So like that I like and am comfortable with. The next project that we're going to be working on is 404, 406 North Ashley, where the old dental clinic is. Our Community Leadership Council is actually from ground one. They're getting an education right now on zoning. That was last month. Then they're going to get education on financing, and then they're going to decide, and they're going to tell us what they would like to see built there. 353 South Main, I am pushing that down the road because there's a lot of development going on in that block. And then the other one we're doing with Community Leadership Council is what we call 123 West Summit. So the city's land at 721 is mostly in a floodplain. We cannot build there. So there's a little corner that's high and dry, which is in orange. And so we'll do a small, probably townhomes or something, maybe owner, maybe rental. We'll find out what CLC decides. We own this building. We bought it from the city for a small amount. I can't remember, about $40,000. So this will be demolished. We had an architect look at the site. So you could do like duplexes. You could do stacked flats. You could maybe at most get about 20 units there because of the limited amount of parking available.
Jennifer, I'm sorry. There's no parking minimum anymore, right? So why is that?
Why is there no parking minimum? Well, that was...
No, I'm sorry. Why does parking limit even housing?
When we have when we have properties, it depends on where your property is. So properties in the downtown, it's a lot easier to not have parking because there's so many other transportation options. Right now at Dunbar, we've had, I want to say 7 people with vehicles. And it's their choice. Like if you don't want to live there because you have a vehicle, don't move in there. If you have a vehicle, you got to figure out where to park your car, and get a parking permit. When we have housing that's outside the downtown and we have family housing, 95% of our families have cars. most of them have 2 cars. It's our younger folks that are not car dependent that are more likely to want to live in our downtown housing that doesn't have parking requirements, or that's a choice that they'll get their own parking pass if they need to. 2000 South Industrial, we'll see. I'm going to try to develop that someday. It's going to be fun. And then Platt and Springbrook, we own a piece of land that we would like to do some like tiny starter homes. So this is where to the home, the single family homes, that was probably where that would happen. And then that is the end of my presentation on development. I would like to put a plug in for our film that we're doing with Cameron Donald with Braco. So we have a trailer that I'd like to show you guys. I encourage you. Go ahead.
Before we go to that, some of these are on commercial corridors, South Industrial Highway, Stadium, Platt. Do you think about street facing commercial or like Dunbar community space when you're looking at those that are with active corners?
Yeah, I mean, 5 years ago, it would be a lot easier to do than it is today. The way the commercial situation is, both in the downtown and outside the downtown. And some areas are zoned where we're required to do that, like at 350 South 5th, and some are not. So every site's different. Okay, Brian.
Yeah, kind of a follow-up on your development pipeline. I'm saying this kind of diplomatically, but what's next? I mean, what's the capacity for more housing through the housing commission after that? Future plans, I'm hearing a lot of pronouncements. People want to do more affordable housing on public land. How much more public land do we actually have available that you could site projects on in your next round?
Other than the ones that I've just showed you, I don't know if there's any other owned by the city, so it would have to be owned by someone else. It would have to be owned by the county, schools, some other public entity, EPA, I don't know where it'll be. I will be retired by the time all these get developed, so I do not know what that capacity will be. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess sort of tangential to that. If you were told, here's a plot of land, you can build a building as tall as the Burj Khalifa as you want, how many units would you actually, how many units does Ann Arbor need to build?
When I first started doing this, maybe 10 or 15 years ago at the Housing Commission, I would say all the time 10,000. Does it all have to be built by us? Absolutely not. But that's more affordable. So whether that's 30, 50, 60, 70, 80% AMI, I think we could absolutely fill those up. Now, do we have locations for them? I don't know, probably not, but I think there's a demand for that amount. Yeah, go ahead.
So I live in the Waterhill neighborhood. There's a lot of construction happening. And in many cases, the older homes are being demolished and, a single family and 2 duplexes or, multiplexes are being built. Is there an alternative to that? And where you're essentially acquiring land because you get the land from the city or something, you're getting a land for relatively low cost and you're building multifamily homes. Is there a way to work with, say, homeowners, who are in this transition zone, for example? There are many, hundreds of properties where owners may want to age in place, where they may have some financial capacity, they want to partner, they want to contribute to the problem, to the solution, not contribute to solving the problem. And rather than having them sell their property and move, and that's an expensive proposition, is there a way you can work with homeowners that have, lots that are large enough to start working with? It's not to scale where you build 100 units in one place, but if you work with 100, homeowners, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But that's another model. Have you given any thought?
Anything is possible. I will say this. I would much rather do a single 100-unit building than 100, because it is tremendous amount of work. Every project is a tremendous amount of work. So for me, looking at our capacity and our impact, I wouldn't want to do that, but someone else in the community might, and if they are, we can support them. That's fine. We have been approached occasionally by homeowners, someone in your neighborhood, and we're open to it. But I would not, as the Housing Commission, want to do that. It's just a lot of work. Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm curious, when you think about ending the housing shortage, there's different proposed strategies, like changing our zoning rules to allow more market rate housing, also subsidizing or building public housing. Do you think that the zoning reform aspect to allow more market rate housing is a waste of time that's only going to enrich developers?
No, I don't. I think it's great. I think it's great. And it doesn't matter if it gets built as market rate, moderate rate, low income, like zoning changes benefit us as much as anybody else. I mean, I don't think city council would turn our project down if we asked for rezoning, but it makes it a lot quicker if the zoning allows us to build denser. And we need every kind of housing because it does have an impact. Some of the less desirable student housing eventually could become affordable housing naturally occurring if there's enough other housing in the marketplace. There is, I know you want to kick me out here in a second. You are starting to see, some of these high rises. Oh, did I hit start? Okay. Where there's now vacancies, more vacancies in some of these student housing high rises. I think that's a good sign. I think that's a good sign that we've hit that kind of saturation point for that type of housing, and you will eventually see them bring down their rates, and or they will have to sell to somebody else if they can't make it financially, and it'll also bring down the rates. I mean, I'm sorry that's true for them, but I don't have a problem with that at all.
Sorry, just in the interest of time, we are getting close to the end. Do you want us to play the trailer?
Does anybody not seen it? If you've all seen it, we don't have to play it. There's a link to it on the handouts. Yeah, there's a link to it on the handouts. Okay. We don't have to play it. Go ahead, Lynn.
Great.
So just a quick question. I think there's a lot of, three foundations funded a housing study or review that had been a decade before the figures after the first study. And I think there's been some misunderstanding that it confirms that there is no housing crisis, when in fact it said there is a housing crisis depending on the population, which is single black mothers, single black and low income.
Under 50,000.
Under 50,000 throughout the county. So can you speak to your thoughts on that, on what the housing crisis is like for the commission and your wait list?
Yeah. So we had, last time we opened our wait list, it was in 2020. We have thousands of people on both our voucher wait list. We have thousands of people on our housing wait list. We get thousands of phone calls. I personally get emails and phone calls almost every day from people who are desperately looking for housing. So there is a huge need, 100%. Over 60% of our residents are Black. Most of our family housing is not always single mothers, but a lot of Black single mother households. IHN, over 90% of their shelter residents are single parent Black households. Huge impact, see it, 100%. Huge need for more housing to serve those households. And we're not going to do that at 350 South 5th. We're not going to do that at Dunbar. We have 2 or 3 families with kids that moved into Dunbar because they're almost all 1 bedrooms. But when we start building farther from the outside of downtown, we'll be doing more family housing, for sure. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
We can use housing vouchers to put people in the homes that we're building.
Yes, yes you can.
Looking to do.
Awesome.
You mentioned that we use housing vouchers not only in Washington County, but in Monroe County.
Yep.
And that was the first time I had heard that. Could you explain why that is?
Yeah, because we have VASH, Veterans Supportive Housing for Homeless Vets, and they have, out of Toledo, they asked us to include Monroe County so they could have folks with vouchers there. It's not that many. It's like 15 or 20. It's not that many.
Yeah, I just don't think the general public in Ann Arbor knows where the affordable housing is distributed and how it works. I think people have a misnomer about it. Certainly, we were doing, Brett Leonard and I and the planning staff were doing a presentation about the comp plan, and there were people in the room complaining about affordable housing. And we were like, look out the window, because we were on Clap Road across from my church. This whole unit is affordable, but it's really hard to comprehend why the city of Ann Arbor is housing people outside of the city, primarily, in Ypsilanti or even to Monroe County. And so, what does the Housing Commission or City Council do to inform people of how we're trying to solve this problem using the resources that we have? Is this information readily available on the website? Is there a narrative about how this all unfolds that people could easily digest?
Easily digest, probably not. But we do have, if you go to the city's website, to the Housing Commission's part of the city's website, we do have a lot of information. We're not great at keeping the most up to date, but we're trying. Yeah.
The thing that I struggle with at the table, at least in planning, is there's not a single narrative story about what we're doing with affordable housing and the challenges, especially with the housing study that former Councilmember Song mentioned, where the consultant refused to be recorded, but on that presentation talked about that we don't actually have a housing crisis in Washington County. And in fact, what most people should do is buy some land outside of the city, build a single family home, and then get an F-150 and put it in their driveway. Like, that was a direct quote. And but it sort of ignores the lived reality of everyday people who are struggling.
Right.
6,000 people applying for 20 units at the Grove.
Right.
That there's this imbalance, and I just don't see a narrative where we're communicating how much we're doing. You talked about us being the only community that does $1 taxes for affordable housing. You talked about us as the only community that's bonding so that we can take the money we're taxing to build more affordable housing. But that story right now is only in this room.
Well, and wherever I go speak, which is a lot of different places. But yeah, we need better marketing, yes.
I'll go with you and ask these questions.
All right. I think I've overstayed my time, so
No, you so much.
thank you, everyone.